Let's do it. All right, everybody. I am so excited because I have Gabby Bernstein on the Storybox today. Now, for those of you that don't know who Gabby is, she's a New York Times bestselling author and has penned 8 books, including The Universe Has Your Back, Super Attractor, and her latest and first audio original, You Are the Guru, in her weekly podcast as well, which launched, I believe, in April and has topped the charts. It's blown up, one of my favorite podcasts as well. It's called Dear Gabby, and we're going to talk all about that today on the show as well. She's part of Oprah Winfrey's SuperSoul 100 as well. She's got a massive social media following. She's helped millions of people, including myself. Gabby Bernstein, can I welcome you so much to the Storybox podcast today?
So nice to be with you. I'm so happy. Thanks for having me.
It's really, really my pleasure and honor. I have wanted to speak to you for a while now, and I really do appreciate you making the time to be here on my show today. I have one question I love starting all my shows off with, and I think you might like it. It is, what does success look like for you?
Success for me, I base and measure on how much fun I'm having. If I'm having a good time and I'm in a good mood and things are flowing, that is success for me. I realized that probably pretty early in my career, that if I measured my success based on how much fun I was having, actually the more outward success I would have. So I made that a very high priority.
What is fun for you? What do you consider being fun and the things that make you happy?
What's so fun for me is actually doing the work that I do. I love writing books. I love working with people on my podcast. I love being a motivational speaker and having the privilege of being able to step out onto a stage and give a talk. What I do for fun, other than work, and because my work really is more of a play for me than it is work. But what I also do for fun is I have a 2.5-year-old, so that's fun. Lots of wild moments there, and kind of a never-ending experience of fun when you have a small child. I also love to cook. I love to gather with my friends who also have children and just get together, let the kids rumble and cook a meal and just get, really spend time. And that actually is something that I'm so grateful for more than ever after having lived through this pandemic and now coming out and being with people I love, which is so important to me.
I am not a father yet. I hope one day to be. So I don't know what it's like to have a 2-year-old running around the house. But did you get a lot of sleep at all?
So I had a weird sleep scenario with my son. I actually had a night nurse working with us for the first 2 months of his life, just to help with with him at night, so I could sleep and wake up at 6 and feed him and whatever it was. So that was a great privilege. But then around the time that she was leaving, I started having insomnia and panic attacks and anxiety, and I had insomnia for about 2 months, and my son was actually sleeping through the night. And that was the scariest experience of my life. But what it really was postpartum depression. That took a while for me to diagnose. So when you ask about the sleep, yes, I slept well for the first 2 months, and then I stopped sleeping entirely, but purely because of postpartum anxiety and depression. And thankfully I've gotten my sleep back, and now I sleep about 10 hours a night.
Yes. I personally love my sleep. I can't do without my sleep, to be honest with you. I'm early to bed and early to rise. That's just how my brain works. But I'm curious about, not to bring up old wounds, but I think it might be helpful for people in going down this road for depression. It's something that I have struggled with from the age of 14. And even more recently in 2019, 2020 a little bit. But I'm curious about, how did you diagnose your depression in the first place? And then what steps did you take to overcome the depression?
Yeah. Well, it took me a while to get a proper diagnosis because I was very stuck in the shame around it.
Mm.
I was, here I was, this meditation teacher, a self-help author. I should have a solution for this. And I kept seeking all those solutions in all the wrong places, because when you have a biochemical condition, as you understand, the answers do not always come on the meditation pillow. Though meditation was a part of the process of rehabilitation, it really it's quite offensive to tell somebody who's having a biochemical condition, oh, just meditate. Really, that's like saying F you, you're not having the experience you're having. And so I didn't realize it at the time, and I didn't want to admit that this was the problem. But I thankfully hit a massive bottom. I actually had suicidal depression with my experience, which led me ultimately to get the right psychiatric support. I got on a medication. I'm so grateful that medication saved my life, an SSRI. I would never have it any other way. And the miracle truly was that getting on the SSRI, which is something I probably never would have done because of all the shame and stigma, but by actually finally getting on it because of the grace of this experience, I realized that I had been living my whole life with an undiagnosed anxiety disorder from PTSD that I just never had diagnosed. And then here I was on this SSRI feeling like, wow, this is humanity. This is presence. This is living without trauma. And it really allowed me to do deeper therapeutic work because I was now safe enough to do that. So I'm really grateful you asked about that. I'm grateful that you're talking about your mental health and whatever you've been openly sharing about, because God, I mean, so many people just live in silence. They suffer in silence. They really deny themselves the resources that they could have because of all of this shame and stigma around it.
I appreciate you being open enough to talk about it as well, because it's mental. At the time we're recording this, it's Mental Health Week here in Australia, and I think it's very important because a lot of men and women even, they suffer in silence, and it's not a good thing. Like, it ends up being worse. It ends up doubling the pain and the hurt and suffering that you end up experiencing, and then it's also selfish in a way because your friends or your family, you're impacting them as well. Like, they try and help, and they try and they try and help you, but you just don't want any part of it. And what I'm curious about for your particular story is, where did the PTSD come from? Did it come from traumas from early childhood, or was it sort of middle age? That sort of thing.
Yeah. When I was 36 years old, I remembered having early childhood trauma that had been dissociated. That actually sent me into a very deep depression as well, in the memory of it all, which was really revealing when I remembered the trauma, because it was an aha moment of, oh, that's why you were a drug addict. That's why you've been struggling with anxiety disorder. That's why you've had all these issues, work addiction and love addiction, and why I was so uncomfortable in my body and in my life. The journey of undoing that trauma memory in my physical body and in my brain has been nothing short of a miracle. I believe that even the postpartum depression was part of the journey of recovering from the trauma, because like I said, getting on the SSRI allowed me to do deeper trauma work that I would never have been able to get to that safe enough place without the support of the medication. So I've been really able this past in 2020 and up until now, do the most extraordinary work that has changed me on a molecular level, changed me emotionally, spiritually, physically, changed my relationships, changed the way I employ people. I'm a completely different person right now than I was a year ago as a result of the therapeutic work I've been able to do. And it's been a journey, and it's a one day at a time gig, but it works if you work it. And I am really proud to say I've just finished a book. I finished my 9th book on this topic, on how we can really transform our experiences from the past and become free in the present moment. That is the biggest book I've ever written from the standpoint of what it took to write it. Right. So I'm proud of that.
I know what you are talking about, because I recently completed my first ever book, and in that I sort of went deep into the past traumas and what sort of sparked my depression in the first place. And then I went into addictions, and then it was a very difficult book to write. So I completely relate to you on that front. I'm curious about, so if you were to say, for example, as a hypothetical one, if you were to come off medication, if you were to stop all that, are you afraid that you would go back into depression?
No. I have made the decision to stay medicated for, I'm trying to get pregnant again.
Mm.
So I have been very fearful of having the PPD and or the anxiety again, because I will never let that happen to myself again, because I know I don't have to. And why would I put myself through that? So the medication I'm on is safe for pregnancy. My both of my psychiatrists and my OBGYN strongly advised me to stay on it, because they're like, your mental health is far more important than, any risk of taking this medication at this time. And there is no risk, frankly, because it's the most highly prescribed medication for pregnant women is the one that I'm on. And of all medication that there is that a pregnant woman would take. So I feel very confident about that. I also feel really responsible by doing that. I'll probably take it through all the way through to the end of my postpartum experience, and then likely titrate off, because I believe that when you do the work while you're on an SSRI, you are changing your neuroplasticity, you're changing your nervous system, you're changing your stress response. So it's not like the SSRI is just like making it all go away. If you do the work simultaneously, I believe, and I've been taught by my therapists and psychiatrists, that you actually can change. And when you slowly titrate off that medication, and I want to use the word slowly as the operative word here, because it's not the kind of thing you want to jump off of, but slowly with support of a psychiatrist, I think that you can come off of it and feel very different from the way you did before. So that's my current plan. Maybe in 2 years, ask me 2 years from now, maybe I'll just titrate to a lower dose. Maybe I'll just get off and be fine. I don't know the answer quite yet, but I do know that I feel better than I've ever felt in my life. I feel safer than I've ever felt in my life. And this is not a PSA for SSRIs, but it is a PSA for getting help when you need it and not getting medicated unless you absolutely need to be medicated, because obviously there's other issues around getting medicated. There's side effects for some people. Sometimes it takes a while to find the right meds. It's not like the easiest thing to do, but if you're desperate and you're suicidal and you're not sleeping and you're not literally not sleeping for 1 minute throughout the night, and you're having, there is support. But once you get that support, the next step is to do the deeper work so that you can actually change. And I'm really grateful that I had this experience, because I can now speak to it with so much authority and authenticity and without any shame and be part of the solution.
I think everyone is glad that you are feeling much better and you are able to help a lot of other people struggling with mental health issues. So that is really amazing. What I'm curious about is, before we dive into your Dear Gabby podcast, which is absolutely amazing, you mentioned you had love addiction, and I'm curious, what in the world is love addiction?
Well, I think it can often be seen as codependency as well, which is the need that you don't feel complete without a romantic partner. For me, that was probably my first addiction. Then the next addiction was the cocaine and the alcohol. Then the next addiction was the work addiction. And then, so there's lots of ways that we will use substances, people, sex, love, whatever it might be, to anesthetize the suffering that we find so impermissible. It's when we start to feel safe enough to address the suffering that the addictions can become less of a burden, that the addictions can subside, that they can be less extreme and ultimately be healed. And I believe that many addicts, the majority, I think, of addicts, this is my opinion, are trauma survivors, I believe. And we've experienced trauma. It sent us to these very exposed places that ultimately became what in IFS therapy we would call exiled parts. And we just want to numb those exiled feelings so much that we will do anything to not have to feel them. And to protect ourselves from having to feel them. And one of the ways that we, quote unquote, air quotes, protect ourselves from feeling that suffering is through sex, it's through work, it's through drugs, alcohol, whatever it is that your drug of choice may be. So the work really is to help those child parts become unburdened and really bring them back to safety so that you don't have to hide them anymore.
I think a lot of people as well, they're afraid to do the work because they're afraid to confront whatever that pain is.
That's exactly right. It's one thing to get clean and sober. It's another thing to do the steps, to really look at your past, to look at your inventory, to take a look at what are what was the harm that caused you to use in the first place. It's no small thing. And most people live their lifetime just terrified to go there, which actually brings me to Dear Gabby, which is so awesome because I've created this podcast so that we can normalize the suffering, normalize things that people typically would be ashamed to talk about. I have people coming on my show just like very openly within the first second saying, yes, I was sexually abused when I was younger. And then I had been cutting myself for 15 years and I was drunk and now I'm clean and sober and I'm struggling with this. And there's just no drama around it. It's just like, yeah, this is the human condition. We all suffer. And here, Dear Gabby is the place where we talk about it. And we can talk about it with a solution-oriented mindset. We can talk about it with a spiritual solution to every problem. We can talk about it as a community and not feeling so alone in that suffering. Mm-hmm. And anyone that struggles with mental illness, I did a whole episode on stopping the stigma and shifting the shame. And it's a whole conversation about mental health.
They're about hour-long conversations. You have quite a few Q&As there. I love some of the questions that people pose on the show. They're very interesting, and I love how it's just authentic and just organic. And I think that if we can remove the shame barrier that is often created by fear that, oh, hey, I'm not enough. What's this person going to think of me if I do share this? Is vulnerability. If we can really remove that and just say, hey, you matter no matter what you're going through. I feel like we're able to help one another tremendously. And I have a Dear Gabby question for you, Gabby.
Oh, baby, give it to me. My favorite thing.
What do you love the most about yourself?
What I love most about myself is how willing I am to be unapologetically me, how willing I am to expose my truth, how willing I am to be authentic and vulnerable. That's my superpower.
I love that. That is so good. So in terms of the Dear Gabby podcast and everything that you have done, has there been a question that has sort of shocked you a little bit, that's taken you back and you've thought, hey, I don't know the answer to this one?
No, not really. No, not in my 20 years of being a speaker. Wow. No. Before I knew about my trauma from my childhood, when I would hear people talk about trauma or talk about sexual abuse, I would offer them spiritual support, but I would feel triggered and I didn't understand why. So that was often a place where I would get a little squirrely, but I still would come to a spiritual solution for them and give them a response that was meaningful, but only until I truly understood why it was so triggering could I really help them and really support them, because I could speak from a place of truth.
So for someone that has gone through sexual abuse, and I'm pretty sure that you've covered this on your program, you had a video that you posted recently, which I absolutely loved, about 3 things you got to do to forgive yourself. And I'm fascinated by, if you have gone through, or if someone has gone through sexual abuse, I have, and I was quite young when that happened, and I've forgiven myself and forgiven the person. I know that completely. So what advice would you give to someone who is yet to forgive themselves and that person for what they did?
Well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge you for your bravery to speak so openly about your experience. Your story is my story: childhood sexual abuse, addiction, depression. We're the same person in this conversation. So I just want to really, really shout out to you. think it's men like you and Lewis Howes and, close friends of mine that have the vulnerability and the bravery to speak up about this that really pave the way for other men, because it's a lot easier for women to talk about this stuff. There's, a whole movement. It's called Me Too, right? So it's not that men haven't been involved in that movement, but it's just not as easy. And I just want to acknowledge you for that. And Tim Ferriss recently did it. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Like all these beautiful men that are finally speaking up and have the comfort level to speak up on behalf of these stories. So I would say if you are not quite ready to forgive your abuser, that is something to be acknowledged and honored. Although I would say that the experience of forgiveness is what will set you free. What I would recommend is to just be open and willing to forgive, because you don't, by just trying to forgive an abuser, ultimately what you would be doing is just overriding yourself, making yourself wrong, making it about them. And that would just trigger you more. The real work is to just say in prayer, I pray to see them in their innocence. I pray to see them in their own suffering. Only a person who could suffer could do something like this. 90%, I mean, I don't know the exact statistics, but most people who abuse people were abused. So it's just really understanding that level of compassion, but it's not to be forced. It's not to be rushed. That's why I think that real forgiveness happens on the metaphysical level. It happens within our subconscious. It's something that we can just open up to and become willing to experience and receive. And the more we stay in the prayer of, I'm willing to see this through love, I'm willing to forgive, I'm willing to be released from this, then we can do nothing and let forgiveness show us what to do. Forgiveness can be revealed to you, and all that's required is your willingness in prayer. I know that can sound super heady and people are like, well, I just have to pray to forgive. The answer is yes. And I can say that without a shadow of a doubt. And we can put a link to that little reel in your show notes so that people can watch it. It's that simple. And I remember one person actually posted on the post and said, oh, this is just so trivial. It's just too simple. And I don't respond to that stuff, but I wanted to respond and be like, it actually is that simple. And I can stand behind it completely.
Do you believe that some things, well, I honestly have looked at this and tried my absolute best from the age that I am, which is still fairly young, 24, looked at forgiveness and sort of some things, can seem very, very easy to forgive. Like, if someone's pushed you down a hill and you just get back up and then you move on. Like, I forgive you for pushing me. But right. The deeper stuff, I've found it depends on the person's willingness 100% to do the work. I guess you could say to do the hard things that are required to get to the place of forgiveness where there is peace. And it's like some people, they don't want to go down that path. They want to keep holding it inside because, once again, it's that vulnerability aspect. It's trying to do the hard stuff to get there. And then, but if you want peace and you want prosperity and fulfillment, then do the work. It's so much better than actually staying stuck.
Yes. I guess that comes back to my point. When I was saying it's easy, I'm not saying forgiveness is easy. I'm saying that the path to forgiveness is easy.
Oh, yeah.
Because so much of, and sorry, I just want to differentiate that not for you, but for the audience, because so much of our resistance to forgiveness is the thought that we have to do something, but it's actually that we can do nothing, but just remain willing and remain in conscious prayer and turning it over and asking for spiritual and inspired guidance. And I mean this because if you just wake up every day and you say, I'll never forgive, then you'll never forgive. If you wake up every single day and say, I'm willing to forgive, I'm willing to set myself free, you can be sure that your conscious awareness will be much more available to receive the opportunities to show up for that, whether it be work and therapy, whether it be walking into that abuser on the street and having to face that, whether it be seeing somebody's story online, revealed back to you, which causes you this opportunity to let go. it doesn't matter how it happens. And so many experiences for me of forgiveness have happened through these strange, bizarre things that you could never have made up, but they were only available for me to accept and embrace or even see with my actual physical sight because I had been open, receptive, and willing to receive it. So the simplicity is really opening up your consciousness and your awareness and your desire to forgive. When you launch a desire, as Abraham Hicks says, then you've put it out to the universe and it will come back to you. And so it's not something you have to do. It's something you have to want.
That's great. This is a question that, in terms of spirituality and everything like that, this is a question I've asked a few other people because I think you might like it, and you have a spiritual element to you. When in your life, when you least expected God or the universe to show up in a big way that it did, that challenged your perspective on the universe or who God is and yourself?
My whole fertility journey has been perceived at times as a challenge. I have a son now. I'm trying to conceive a second child. I've had to use some interventions, medical interventions, and it took me a few years of trying on my own before I did medical intervention for my son. And there's a lot of story behind all that. But what I have been in awe of is how much God there has been in it, because all of the holdups, all of the blocks, all of what seemed to be just awful, like, oh, it's taking so long or whatever it is, were divine. They were absolutely exactly as they needed to be. Even some of the holdups that have occurred for me this past year in trying to conceive, I'm already able to say, oh my God, that was perfect. So yeah, I see God in all of that. And that was it has been challenging. But the more I choose to see the God in the situation, or the love or the spirit in the situation, the easier it is to go through it with grace and just be willing to see any obstacle as an opportunity for growth and opportunity to go in a different direction and to stay committed and devoted to that truth.
Speaking about obstacles and challenges that you've been through recently, about your Dear Gabby podcast, what's been sort of something that's challenged you while doing the show?
Really nothing. No, nothing. The show was built out of love. It was originally a Instagram show I started in 2020. Every week on my Instagram, I would go live for at least an hour. It became a ritual for thousands of people all over the world to come in and be Dear Gabby. It became like a home for people. And I then, by the grace of God, just when things are in the flow, everything unfolds. So I didn't have any intention of making it a podcast, but I started getting offers to do a podcast, and I started having the agents wanting to represent the podcast. And I just followed the good, orderly direction, the God in the situation, and we just took one step forward. And it had been revealed to me. For years, people had said to me, why don't you have a podcast? And I was like, because I don't have the show yet. Or because the answer now I can say is because I never knew what the show was until now. And so when you allow yourself to be a humble servant of a higher power, you are shown what to do, where to go, what to say. You don't have to force anything. And there isn't much challenge when you live that way. I'm not saying it hasn't been a shitload of work to get this podcast up and running, and that I don't have full-time employees just completely devoted just to this, and all that has taken from my team and their beautiful effort. But even my team working overtime to get this up could all say that this has felt in many ways effortless, because it's been a joy and a privilege for them as well to be in the pursuit of something they believe in. So when you're doing work that's good for the world and you believe in it and you're having fun, it doesn't feel like work.
Amen to that. I mean, I don't have the full-time employees or anything like that. It's just me that does this. So, but
that's where I was at when I was your age, baby. Don't worry. I was sending every freaking email. I was building my own blog. You're ahead of me, man. You're way ahead of me.
It's an amazing experience though.
By the time you're 41, I'll be really excited to see what you're doing.
I can't wait to see what my life brings, to be honest with you. But Gabby, I have two final questions for you, if you don't mind, because I know your time is very valuable. I'll ask this question to all my podcast friends that do appear on the show. But if you were to ask a question to anyone alive or dead, who would it be, why, and what question would you want to ask them?
I would want to ask my late mentor, Dr. Wayne Dyer, what it's like on the other side.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think that I already kind of get the message from him sometimes that he's happy over there, but I would love to know more about what goes down in the spiritual realm.
Mm. You're giving me so many more paths to go down with Wayne Dyer.
I know.
It's not fair. I'm going to have to bring you back on
do it again.
But this is my final question for you. So it's my all-time favorite one. It's a hypothetical question. So I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you've been able to reach the age of 100. All your friends and your family have decided to put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. Don't ask me how they got it. We'll just call it magic. And they've been able to get it and show it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life?
Oh, I have chills when you ask that. I would love to have it be a string of all my live talks, because when I'm speaking is when I'm channeling most. The experience of being a speaker is an experience of allowing a power beyond myself move through me. And I would love to just at 100 years old, sit back and watch the speaking evolve over the years and see what that looks like.
That'd be an amazing film to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be watching it with everyone else. But Gabby, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. Where can people find you, connect with you, learn more about your show and everything that you're doing?
DearGabby.com. Listen to the show, subscribe on Apple, review it, share it with your friends if it serves you. That's where you can find me. And it's just wonderful to be with you. I just want you to know how proud I am of you. And I look forward to meeting you in person someday. You're so cool.
Likewise. I can't wait. It's going to be an amazing experience. But Gabby, thank you so much for coming on the Storybox podcast, part 1.
Part 1, definitely.